It's the bewitching hour. It's 7 o'clock. It's time to start whatever you came here for. And then you can do the rest later. Good evening, welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Sherry Boraz, AVA's Executive Director. I'll be brief because I know you're all here and anxious to hear what our storytellers have to say about tonight's theme, Reckless. I'm totally intrigued. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of our storytellers, the Mudroom Committee, AVA staff, especially Cheryl, all the volunteers, as well as Pon, who provided the delicious dinner that a lot of us had tonight. You're surrounded by the impressive art of many AVA members. These are people who live right here in our community, who are your friends, neighbors. I think you would all agree that their work only adds to the ambience of tonight. If anything should strike your fancy that you must have, or you think that you know someone who should have it, be sure to track down Cheryl, or you can hit anybody who's got one of these name tags. As AVA approaches its 50th year, we want to acknowledge a handful of Upper Valley artists who in 1973 wanted to show their work and ended up having their first show in a barn in Norwich. Those artists planted the seed for AVA as we know it today, a robust and unique organization that serves as one of the few places in the Upper Valley that presents strong, thought-provoking work, both visual and verbal. To help us celebrate the coming anniversary year and to sustain the future of AVA, AVA relies on the support of people like you. And there are a variety of ways that you can help, including attending events like this, which I think we would all agree is painless. You can make a financial donation, you can become a member, you can take our classes, or continue to enjoy us for all the festivities that we're going to have in 2023. In return, we freely offer you a sanctuary to enjoy art and get together with friends and the rest of the community. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our MC, and I want you all to enjoy the show. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm Judith Hertog, and I'm one of the members of the Mudroom organizing team. I'm also a storyteller occasionally. And first of all, I wanted to reassure you all that even though I have a scary cough that you may hear every once in a while, I'm COVID negative. I had COVID 2 weeks ago. I'm clear now, but I just have this cough that I can't shake. But be careful because it's really going around. I'm hearing a lot of people who are sick, but I'm negative. Just know that. Thank you. And another reminder, if you got a ticket, don't forget to put the ticket slip with your name in the raffle bin out on the table over there, because after the intermission, we will do a raffle and you have a chance to win prizes. Okay, so don't miss out. Make sure your raffle tickets are in the basket over there. And also, on that same table are paper slips on which we invite you to submit your spontaneous story ideas. And again, after intermission, we will draw a name from the basket, and hopefully we can invite someone from the audience to tell a story. So don't be shy. If you are inspired listening to these stories and you remember a story of your own, submit your name and we would be happy to have you tell an improvised on-the-spot story. And in general, I encourage everyone to share your stories, get together, tell your stories, and want to plug in a little initiative that I and another friend started organizing in the Upper Valley, Story Jam. This is something we're doing together with Jam. Thank you for filming, by the way. And the idea is different from the mudroom. This is not going to be storytelling to an audience. It's a circle where everyone in the community is invited to come and just share 5 minutes stories and listen to everyone else. So there's no pressure to perform. It's just sharing in a circle. It's kind of a less intimidating way to practice storytelling than standing in front of a big audience. So keep that in mind, and we're meeting next Thursday, a week from today, in what's it called? The jam space that's in between Tucker Box and Piecemeal Pies. Marketplace, exactly. So that's where we meet, Marketplace. And we meet 6 till 7:30. Yes, I hope to see you, some of you there. And I also wanted to already tell you to start getting ready for the next mudroom on March 9th. We're always looking for storytellers. So anytime you have a story idea, let us know. And we actually created a special pitch phone line this time, so you can just leave a voice message and tell us about your story. But without further ado, let's start the storytelling. And I would like to invite to the stage Margo O'Day, a true and tried storyteller who grew up in the Upper Valley, and many of her stories take place just around here. Thank you. Welcome.
So, like she said, I grew up in the Upper Valley, and Reckless should have been the Sharky middle name. I come from a big family. I'm the oldest of 7 children. My dad was a bricklayer. My mother was from Germany and a housewife. When I was about 10 or 11, we were living in Enfield. At the time, I only had 4 brothers. But we were living in Enfield on Main Street in a 2-bedroom apartment, so it was a little tight. And every Saturday, my dad would get home from work, bring the truck, and my mother would say, "Take these kids out of here, I've had them all week." So I'd say, "Okay, get in the truck." I always sat in the front seat because I was the oldest. And my 4 brothers would get in the back, and we'd just roam the fields, and, you know, up and down all the roads, because my dad knew a lot of people. So we go by the town dump and up a big hill, and he pulls up in front of a little red house. Side of the house said, Jones Hill School, established 1777, for sale. My dad goes, "That sounds good." Says, "Go next door." So he goes next door, and he's talking to this man, Mr. Clough. And they're blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And I'm in the truck going, you know, come on, I want to go home. And they shake hands. My father has a piece of paper, gets in the truck, and he looks at me and goes, "I just bought a house." And I was like, "You didn't tell Ma." Well, anyways, so we turn around, and we stop in front of the house. He has a key. We go in, and I notice there's no bathroom. And there's one light, a wood stove, and there's no water. There's a pump. And I was like, we're in trouble. So my father was a little reckless, to say the least. We get in the truck. We go home. I said, this is going to be fun. We go in the house, and he goes, "Schatz, I got great news." And my mother says, "What?" "Get in the truck, I gotta show you something." So I said, "I'll stay here." He goes, "Oh no, you gotta come." We get there. He gets out, and she's just looking at him. And he looks at her and goes, "Go inside." She goes in, she goes, "What?" "I just bought this place, and we're moving in tomorrow." My mother sat down and cried. Big tears. But she accepted it, and we moved to the hill. So school was out in June, and I got off the bus. I was 10 or 11, expecting to go play with my friends, have a great time. So the first day, getting ready to go out, my mother goes, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to see Donna next door." Blah, blah. She goes, "No, you're not." Says, "Why?" She goes, "See your brothers?" And my brothers at the time were 7, 6, 9, and 5, because they were like stair steps. I said, "Yeah." She goes, "You're babysitting for the summer." And I was like, "No." She goes, "Oh, no. I carried my infant brother across Germany being chased by Russians. This is the least you can do for me." And I said, "Well, okay, what are the rules?" "You know the rules." I had no clue what she was talking about. So I established my own rules. I told the boys, "You don't rat on each other. We never tell our parents anything." My mother told me, "I want you to leave at 8, pack a lunch. I don't want to see you again until dinner." So I have 4 boys on top of a mountain full of woods and every other thing, and I have to take care of them. I didn't really want to do this, but I figured if I threatened them, that we could get away with it. My brothers did everything possible, but nobody ever told. And then I had my brother Mark, who's like the middle child. And Mark was one of these kids who liked to read. My mother would go shopping every week, and if you spent enough money, you could get a Funkin' Wagnall's encyclopedia book. And they had all sorts of colored pages in them, and Mark loved them. And he would read them and get ideas, and I'd have to stop him because some of them were a little crazy. And then he got to Leonardo da Vinci, and he was obsessed. I went to the library, I got him a book about Leonardo da Vinci, and he saw Leonardo's flying machine. And I just let him go. I figured, he's into this, and Mark would really obsess about things. And the rest of us were just, my brothers were doing weird stuff. Taking BB guns, shooting rats at the dump. Just stuff boys do, making go-karts and getting into accidents, and explaining to my mother stuff like that was a little hard, but I got through it and they didn't rat me out. So they also knew that if they ratted me out, I would beat them up, because I was still bigger than them. So Mark says, "I want to build a flying machine." And I said, "Okay, go for it." He goes, "Well, let's go to the dump." The dump was like a department store for my brothers. This is back before you did recycling, and you could go to the dump and find basically anything. So we went to the dump, and I'm watching him, and he's got some wood, but it was very thin plywood. And he got some ropes, and he was happy. We get back to the house, he's got a little saw, and he goes, "I'm making wings." I said, "Okay, this is gonna be fun." And we were encouraging him, because I figured it was entertainment. And so Mark worked on this for over a week, cut them all out, and he's going, "Do these look like wings?" I said, "Exactly." And I just didn't want to be bothered. I wanted to go with my friends. I had to watch these idiots. And my brothers were like ducks, little ducklings. They just run around into each other and do stupid things. So I sort of viewed them like that. So Mark's been working on this, and he goes, "I think I need feathers." I said, "Oh yeah, wings have feathers." So we had chickens, geese, and ducks. And he went down and he collected for a week all these. He goes, "What'd I do?" I said, "Glue them on." We got rubber cement. He glued them all on. And I said, "Now what are you going to do?" He goes, "I'm going to fly." And I said, "Well, don't fly off the roof." I said, "Maybe a tree." So my father had extended the house. And there was a living room, and it had a big picture window, and it faced the road. Across the road was a maple tree. And it was a tall maple, but the branches were pretty low. You could climb it. We did it all the time. And it was fall, so there were no leaves. I said, "Jump out of that one." I didn't think he would be brave enough to go very far up. But at this time, it was like, okay, so he went over started climbing. And we stood in the picture window, me, Donnie, and Pat, watching him. And I'm like, well, how far do you think he's going to get? Well, I don't know. Well, he got all, like, I don't know, 15 feet. And he's hanging onto the branch. He's got his wings, and he's like this, across the branch. And we just were like, okay. And then we opened the door, and we're watching him. He's got the wings. And my brothers yelled, jump, jump. Just as my mother comes around the corner, and she's watching us yell jump at him. And Mark jumps, dives out of the tree. The limbs broke his fall. And my mother was screaming on top of her lungs. I was like, he's not even hurt. But I learned a valuable lesson. I am now the queen of reckless people because I'm the one who encourages them and makes them what they are. My brother was well, but through the years, they've all done extremely reckless things, and I'm very proud of them, but a little nervous when I get a phone call.
Thank you so much, Margo. Our next storyteller is Maggie Ronan. Welcome, Maggie. And Maggie is an emerging visual artist and performance artist from Sharon. You live in Sharon right now. Welcome, Maggie.
Can you hear me if I talk like this? Yep. Okay, cool. I was reading about loneliness before I came here, and so I really appreciate the opportunity to come and share because I think sharing kind of like helps with that. So yeah, let's see. So I'm a pretty shy person, but at a time in 2019, I found myself in the middle of Golden Gate Park, running around naked with my favorite bra spinning around above my head, yelling, Viva la Revolucion. And so I'm going to take a step back and look at why that happened. So the day before, I woke up in a cottage in North Berkeley that I had been staying at for a little bit, a family friend's house. And I was being chased by the husband, my friend, of my best friend in the entire world, Liz and Dan. And I was being chased by Dan. So I had laid out in my bed and set up a scene to be ready to be killed. And I took a T-shirt that said "The future is female ejaculation" and spread it across a piece of luggage because I wanted to be found that way when I was shot. And so I laid out, and while I prepared myself, because Dan was climbing on the roof of the building, I thought about it and I was like, you know what, fuck this, like I'm gonna run. So I got up, I put on my running shoes, and I took off to North Berkeley down the street. And I took off to go to the BART station. And I got there, and Dan's red Subaru was sitting outside, and I saw him waiting for me. So I decided to run to the nearest park and call a Lyft. While I was afraid that I was going to be like looked at for being like a weird person at the playground, so I was kind of like hiding in the bushes a little bit. And I called a Lyft and took it to Oakland because I didn't want Dan to follow me. And I ended up in Oakland, and I ran down the street and talked to someone that I was being pursued by someone with a gun. And they were like, "This happens all the time. We can take you to the police station." I got up, they pointed me in the right direction, but I got a little scared, and I decided that I was gonna get on BART and go further away so Dan couldn't find me. So I went to the end of the BART line, Dublin Pleasanton, and got out there, and there was like a campus of a tech workplace called Workday. And I ended up going inside and like inquiring about getting a job there. after I had visited there for a little bit and talked to some of the people who work there, I decided that it might be better to change where I live. So I went to a condo place and interviewed for a house there and talked to them about their housing options. And then, yeah, I decided that it would be better to go back to San Francisco, my home at the time, to go back to be closer to home. So I got back on BART, going in the opposite direction, and ended up getting out at Civic Center, where I started running again with the running. Still convinced that my phone was going to, tell Dan where my location was, and I worked on trying to untrace myself that way. So I ran to Buena Vista Park, which is closer to my house, and I found a good place to hide, and I sat down on a log there, and someone came up and joined me, who was a man from Guatemala named Ernesto Salazar Kennedy Gonzalez. And we ended up talking, me and my broken Spanish, him and his good Spanish. And he told me that he'd come from Guatemala and was hiding also. So we talked about our experiences being chased. He was being chased by ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I was also being chased by Dan. So, so I was talking to him and it was kind of okay, I've had enough. And we hugged goodbye. And then he steals my wallet, or he shows me that he's stolen my wallet and puts it in his back pocket. And he's like, no, we're traveling together now. Far be it from me to argue with Ernesto. So I embarked on a trip with him. And we went to the Haight where I lived and found a place to sleep that night. We slept under the stars. There was one star above us, and I convinced myself that that was a sign from the universe. And then the next morning we slept together. And then the next morning we went to Golden Gate Park, and they happened to be having a volunteer day for the AIDS Memorial Grove, which is a cool place in Golden Gate Park, and they do a lot of community engagement there. Anyway, they let us kind of take refuge with them, and they had food, and we kind of explained the situation a little bit, and they were really understanding. And we kind of had this very spiritual experience where they were introducing all the volunteers and kind of the purpose for the park, or the purpose for the Memorial Grove, which is really moving. And they set us up with a place to volunteer and to do some work in the garden. But police were coming also, so we decided to go on the move. And at that point, we went back to some of the bushes in Golden Gate Park and hid out there. That's when I got completely naked and spun my bra over my head. And then we had to go to the bathroom, so we went to 19th and Irving, where there's a bathroom set up in the park. And I was still being chased by Dan, and so came out, and Ernesto just didn't come out. So I decided that he was dead, and that I needed to report it, or that he had been shot, and then I needed to report it. So I went the 19 blocks up to UCSF emergency room, because it was an emergency, and I started telling what had happened, and then the police officer who came out talked to me and told me that they were actually worried about me, and and so I got admitted to inpatient treatment there, and then an outpatient program, and now I live with bipolar 1 in Sharon, Vermont. Yeah.
Thank you, Maggie, for that story with its surprising twist. And I also really want to thank you for being a first-time storyteller. And I really appreciate, yes, and I appreciate that you started off by saying how shy you are, because a lot of times the best stories are from people who think of themselves as being shy and introverted and not necessarily inclined to be storytellers. So I really appreciate that you gathered the courage to share this amazing story. And I also want to encourage other people, even if you're introverted or you think of yourself as shy, you can do it. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the next storyteller, John Weatherly, who is a scientist who lives locally and, well, just listen to the story. Welcome, John.
All right, thank you. I assume you can hear me through this. That's great. Well, when we talk about reckless stories, we all seem to go back to our youth. It seems to be that's where it all happens, apparently. My story's a little bit like that. I would say in my youth, I'll say go back to college years. I was a rather studious student, undergraduate at the Ohio State University, and I was a physics major, and I would study. And so, what physics major you take? You take a math class, and you take physics class, math class, physics class, and you keep going that, but then at that point I realized I do not know why I am a physics major. I have no idea what I'm going to do with a degree in physics, but I'm in the middle of it, and so and it's starting to junior year, and I'm about to, it's winter, semester is about to start, and I'm about to take what is called, actually in the student handbook, the toughest course at Ohio State University. The student handbook says the toughest course at Ohio State University. It is actually taught by Dr. Tuff, Dr. Jim Tuff. He teaches E&M, electricity and magnetism, and that's why it's written there. So I'm going to go into this course. It's January in 1986, and my best friend Gary and I are going back to school to start the semester for about an hour away from Columbus. So we get in his car and we're leaving from our parents' houses and we drive to Columbus. And it was January, but it was a warm day, kind of like yesterday was here. Warm, rainy, foggy. It was only about an hour away. So we drive, he's driving, so driving along just I-70, straight shot, go right to Columbus. But, of course, you get there, and as you come in, of course, the only high spot in Ohio is on an overpass as you come into town, right, just on the highway. That's the high spot. But as we get there, basically, a cold front comes through and completely freezes all the rain and everything, and the whole highway becomes a sheet of ice, as you probably are aware from around here as well. So it turns into a sheet of ice, we come over this overpass, and that's where it freezes first, as you know, and the car slows down in front of us, and we just continue sliding, and Corey just gently nudge the car ahead of us, and it goes sliding off this way, and we keep on going, but we get to the end of the overpass, so we park, and his car is kind of damaged in the front, so we get out, he parks along along the center median, just beyond the overpass. Along there's the concrete Jersey barriers along the middle. So we're sort of parked in that lane in the middle, stuff like that. So we get out, okay. And of course we get out, we're standing in front of his car. It's not too bad, it's the damage. Okay, we can drive home. And of course he's looking at it and I'm looking at that. And I look beyond him, beyond the car, at the overpass, and can only describe what I call a whole lot of physics in action. Where one car is hitting another car, it's hitting another car, it's hitting another car. They're just like pinballs. They're just going this way and that way and this way and that way, and it's all just a big chain reaction. Fascinating, except as I look at that, then the biggest one is a big semi-truck goes behind them and slides and is kind of coming at it sideways on the ice, just coming this way, hits, of course, the concrete barrier in the middle, and jackknifes, and the box comes completely off the truck and takes out all the other cars, and is coming right at us. And we're standing there, and I grab Gary, and I say, "Run!" And I grab him, and I turn around, and I start running, like a cartoon character on the ice, and of course, and I do that for several moments, it seems like, because behind me, what I hear is, and I hear that for a few more moments, and I'm not getting very far until suddenly the front of Gary's car hits me from behind and knocks me down flat along the concrete Jersey barriers. And it just knocks me down flat, and all I can hear is, and as Gary's car, the box comes over Gary's car, pushes it, and grinds right past me in about a space about this wide as I'm laying there. And the top of the box just kind of like across the concrete barriers, just grinding all over, right over my head as I'm laying there. And then it stops. And it's quiet. And I get up. And I look back, and where's Gary? And of course, he was an English major, and he's smart. He, of course, jumped to the other side of the barriers. So he stands there, and I stand there. He was looking for me, of course. I disappeared because over the, and he stood up, we're like, we did it, yay, we made it. And the snow is blowing now, and we're just standing there going, okay, like, luckily, the 10-car pileup that happened, everything, nobody was actually really badly hurt. Everybody kind of slid around and everything else. Gary's car, not so much. It was flattened down just down to below the seats and everything, where we would have been if we had been in there, of course, and stuff like that. So it's just underneath this truck. And so we're standing there. So we get a ride home with stuff like that. So it's ice, it's snow, and stuff like that. I could say that the cold front that came through was actually one for the record books. It came through, it continued all the way down through the southern United States that winter, and kind of like the one that happened last year that was in Texas. It was a little bit like that, but it all the way down. Temperatures freezing well down in Florida from that. It was actually 3 days later after that that the freezing temperatures in Florida are what caused the Challenger disaster, 3 days after this happened, because there were temperatures down to like 18 degrees when the launch was happening. So between the crash and that, I was pretty shook up. I was just starting the semester of Dr. Tuff's class, but I got over that. I worked hard through the class. I certainly gave me a new perspective by the end of that, which was, I should know what I'm doing. I should know why I'm doing it. I really want to have some fun while I'm doing this, and you only get one shot to do it. I finished Dr. Tuff's E&M course with a solid B+. And then at the end of that, I signed up for courses for the beginning of my senior year, the next semester. And so what did I sign up for? Yeah, some physics, some math, whatever. But also fiction writing, sounds fun. And actually a PE class in boxing. Obviously, don't know why, it just seemed fun. So, but I had to get my physics professor to sign off on my course. He had to get approval to do it because I was a physics major. And I took it to Dr. Tuff, and he goes, fiction writing? What are you going to write about? Boxing? I said, well, maybe, yeah. So anyway, so beyond that, certainly had senior year, had a lot more fun, had figured out a little bit more of what I wanted to do. Ended up, eventually, I got out of physics itself, moved into something else I actually was a little more interested in. Of course, what is that? I went and studied ice and extreme cold weather for 30 years. So I could just say, so whatever you have an event or like that or not, go out there, be bold, be reckless, but don't have a wreck. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. And everybody, drive safely when you go home later. We're going to take a short intermission of about 15 or 20 minutes. But before you go, please, please, please put in your story ideas for the audience story over there, because we really want to hear a story from the audience. And don't be shy, it doesn't have to be a grand story, just a short 5-minute anecdote. We would love to hear that. See you after intermission. I think it's time to reconvene and continue the storytelling, probably, right? Is everyone back here and ready for more stories? Woo! Before we do that, I want to plug in a little advertisement for myself, if you allow me, just because I'm here. And I'm going to be offering, I'm actually a writer, and storytelling is a thing that I picked up later because I realized it's so nice to connect with people directly instead of through the written page. But I think I'm more of a writer than a storyteller, actually. And I'll be offering a writing course at my home in Norwich, starting in January. So if you're interested in writing, you're looking for a writing workshop to join, 6 weeks, I put some advertisements on the table over there. You can pick it up on the way out if you're interested. Or you can find also information on my website at judithhertog.com. And to repeat what I said before, a week from today, we are meeting for the Story Circle, which is organized through JAM, Junction Arts and Media, who are here to film the event today. Thank you again. And the Story Circle is not going to be recorded. It's just a very intimate event of circle storytelling, just to create community. That's the idea behind it, for people to get together and get to know each other as a community through each other's stories. And we're going to be doing that every 2 months. So those are the 2 things I wanted to advertise. More business that we have here. We have the raffle. I think whoever put in their name here has a pretty good chance, because I think there's way fewer tickets here than I see people in the audience. So you missed out. If you didn't put in your stub, you're missing out. I'm going to raffle 2 pairs of tickets to the Mudroom, for the March Mudroom, and then a membership. So I just drew a ticket, and this is for 2 tickets for the Mudroom. I'll have to put on my reading glasses. I hope you wrote clearly. I see someone here called Jen Hopkins? Jen Hopkins! You know what? So you got 2 tickets for the next Mudroom. I'm going to put this in my pocket and give it to Cheryl, our administrative assistant, who is going to take care of remembering to give you the tickets. Congratulations. And I'm going to draw another ticket for another stub for another pair of tickets. And again, I hope you wrote, oh, that's Alice Werbel. Oh, you're sitting next to each other even. And we're neighbors, that too. So, okay, I'm going to put this also in my pocket. And now the big prize is going to be a 1-year AVA membership. And I have a stub that I just pulled out. And the name on here is just Jen, with a phone number, 603. Okay, Jen, congratulations. I'm not going to read out your phone number, but I'm going to put this ticket in my pocket and keep it there, and Cheryl will then get in touch with you. And also, look at this. These are all the story submissions we got during intermission. We don't always get that lucky. I figure you were really inspired today. Oh, one reminder. At some point we want to go home tonight, so don't make your story like endless. Ideally, it would be like 5 to 7 minutes, because there have been times that we invited a storyteller from the audience up on stage and forgot to mention that. And we've had stories that went on for like 40 minutes. So that's not really the intention. I can warn you at like 7 minutes. Okay, the name that I drew is Keith. Oh, a camp counselor. Okay, that looks like a good story. Keith, are you still here? Are you still willing to come up here? Sure. Okay. Woo, and this is really brave, yes. Yes. Do you want me to keep time and then tell you when it's like, when you're like going over 10 minutes or so, just so you know? And I'm like, how about at 7 minutes? I'll warn you.
It kind of started as a lark and it's become very serious.
I know. Well, you're committed now.
Do you have like a light you can flash in the back maybe or something? Or do you just want to?
I'll give you a secret yeah. Secret signal. Yes. Good luck.
Hi, my name's Keith. I'm a nurse up at the hospital here. And I'm originally from North Carolina, but in the summer of 2011, I actually spent the summer as a kayaking instructor at a camp up off of Winnipesaukee. Name of the camp, I'm sorry, I'm really nervous.
You're doing good.
The name of the camp is Camp Cavian, and it's a all-boys camp, and I just did kayaking, and then I had kids during the evening. And we would often do things in the lake. You know, we'd practice rolling, we'd practice paddling around, we'd take little excursions and things like that. But we also did trips out to rivers, and so once a week, you know, I'd get up and I'd have to like sell my activity for the day to all the kids, and I'd say, all right, today we're gonna go and paddle the Manly, whatever the river was that day. And you know, it was a boys camp, so there was a lot of like, you know, sort of going on. And which of course, you know, all the kids are like 14 and they're like, yeah, we're men. And so occasionally we would also do an overnight trip on the Androscoggin up in northern New Hampshire, if any of you guys have ever been up there. And so we would drive up there, we'd set a shuttle up at the very end of the river, and when we'd drop in the middle of the trip off, a bunch of camping gear, and that night we'd all camp out, we'd tell stories, we'd sing camp songs, you know, and play games and do all that sort of stuff. And so you're always like, as a camp counselor, and as a parent, I'm sure, I'm not a parent, but this is how I kind of think about that, is that you're always looking for things to do. You want to have a good time with the kids, you want to show them exciting things, you want to be creative and like positive and like try and have a good time. And so I had the idea that in hindsight, not the best idea, but at the time seemed like just a great idea. So if any of you have been up there, we were right close to Errol, the little town of Errol. And then just north of Errol is the Canadian border north of Colebrook. And so I had the great idea of taking a whole bunch of children, going to the Canadian border, and then one of the kids had, at the time it was a new thing, a digital camera. And we were going to take photos of the Welcome to Canada sign, and then we were going to have a great story to tell everybody else back at camp, and they were going to be so jealous that we went to Canada, yada, yada, yada. And so we paddle for the day, we get to camp. I had really been like selling it hard all day. I was like, you guys, Canada is a magical place. Think of your wildest dream. That's how Canada is. And I had never been to Canada before, but you know, like I said, I was trying to sell it pretty hard. And so we like hype it up all day long. We get to camp that night, and I had like, in my head on the van ride up, I was like making up songs, which of course I wish I could remember, but I can't remember now. And so we get there and I'm like, do you guys know the song about the Canadian moose that did this thing and yada yada? And I'd sing the song and then say when we get to the chorus, and then we'd all sing along on the chorus. And it sounds corny, but you know, it was a good time. And so then we like get done with dinner, we all pile in the van, and we drive to the border. And nobody had informed me of this, but in my head, it was always US down here, border, Canada, border here, Canadian border station here, US border station here, and that you had to go through the Canadian station in order to actually pass into the country. But that's not how it works if you've never been up there before. It's border station, and then the Canadian border station is actually inside of Canada, which now makes a lot of sense because they're Canadians. And so I didn't think about the fact that we were actually going to be like up there, and if any problems happened, we were like in the country. And so pull up to the border station, and I like had the first little instance that like, well, this was like, okay, this is real. When out of the border station walks, and again, if you've never been up there, a gentleman who it turned out was incredibly nice, but at the time, full-on fatigues, you know, semi-automatic rifle strapped on his chest, bulletproof vest, you know, rifle, or not rifle, handgun on his hip, like everything, the whole 9 yards. And he was like, what's your mission here in Canada? Not mission, but what's your, well, it kind of was like a little mission, but like, what's your intent here in the country? And I was like, well, got these kids, we just wanted to take pictures of the Welcome to Canada sign, which it turns out there's also not some like big, there's not a sign. Who knew? And so, a sidebar, at the time, I had this mustache, but it was about this long, and I braided it. Which I'm not proud of, but it is what it is. I also had gone to camp pretty shaggy. I had long hair that hadn't been cut in ages. And then it was further on in the summer at this point, and I had hair down to here. I think I showered like once that whole summer because I was in the water every day. I had 2 pairs of swim shorts and like 2 shirts. They were both wet every day. I reeked, I'm sure, of mold and like every other like gross thing that you've spent up at a summer in camp. And I was not looking like, you know, the most well put together individual in the world. And then the van we were in was a completely unmarked van. That was also, it had been well loved. There were dents, there were some rusty spots. It wasn't a tip-top van. And so he says, okay, well, we'll need, you know, IDs for everybody. And I'm like, okay, great, here's my passport. I happened to think of that because I embarrassingly pre-planned this. My co-counselor, because we had talked about it, also had brought his passport, and he grabbed those and he was like, and the kids' passports? And we had no identification for any of the children. And so at this point, we're 2 younger, dirty individuals in an unmarked van with 6 underage children in the back. And so he immediately says, go ahead and pull into the spot over here. So we pull in. He makes the kids stay in the van at first, pulls my co-counselor and I out of the van, starts running information on us, and then meanwhile his co-worker goes into the van and begins to interview each of the children individually in, I don't want to say like a cell, but like not a friendly room. And the kids were 14 to 17. So they were, you know, not children, but from a situation that was like pretty enjoyable and kind of funny, it like immediately went very downhill for like everybody involved. And so I still to this day don't really know what questions exactly they asked him in the interview, because I mean we asked him about it afterwards, but a lot of them are still in jail now. But so like just within like 10 minutes, I think because we were just both like sweating bullets and like so scared and so apologetic, the guy that was working, the border agent, was kind of figuring out like, oh, these guys' story is real. And he was like, I'm sorry, at this point, I have already started a process and we're running background checks on both of you and this is a thing. And so we ended up having to fill out paperwork where I now have 6 counts of international attempted child trafficking in Canada. And it's not quite done yet, but so again, with the border situation, we're here, borders here, we now get turned around, obviously, and have to go back through US Customs. And so the co-counselor and I, because we had handed over our passports, had left them there. So turn around and drive back through. The Canadian guys were like, we'll radio them down, we'll let them know everything checked out, like everything's fine, you know, but you're not going to be able to come into the country. And so we pull up to the US border station, and I don't know what had happened, but the Canadians never called the US side of things. And so we're there, the US guys are grilling us, they do the same thing, they pull the kids and interview all the kids, and at this point it's getting kind of like late in the evening, I think it's in like the 10 o'clock range, and the Canadians like we didn't have our IDs, and the US guys are grilling us about, where's your IDs, yada, and we're like, we left them to the Canadian side. And finally the Canadians call over and they're like, we're gonna bring their US passports back over, and so they bring them over. And then the head Border Patrol agent at the US office finally like calls me and is like, I want to talk to you, and he like brings me into his office, and he does that like scene out of a movie where he like strolls in and he like sits down in the chair and he kicks his feet up on the desk. Like he's like cracked the case. And he's about to like really get to the root of what's going on. And he throws my passport, and I had also given him my driver's license out on to the table in front of me. He's like, what's wrong with this picture? And I had no idea what was wrong with the picture, other than I had, you know, messed up. But he finally points out, he's like, take a look at your driver's license and your passport. And I looked at him, and my name on my driver's license was spelled incorrectly. And I had just never noticed it. So my driver's license and my passport at that point weren't matching. And more interestingly, my last name is Efland, and I was born in the town of Efland. And at the time, my driver's license was still from my hometown. He's like, so you're Mr. Efland from Efland? So I said, yes, I was from Efland. He happened to have an atlas which had the town of Efland in it. And so I was able to prove that at least it was, yes, a real town. And then in my passport, my last name was in there. And so, yes, I was Keith Efland from Efland, and that all checked out. And then at that point, finally, what ended the whole saga was we found on the insurance paperwork in the van the phone number for the camp. And we called the camp around 10:30 at night, which of course routes immediately to the camp director. And the Border Patrol agent explained the situation and what was going on, and then went like this. And the phone wasn't on speakerphone, but it might as well have been on speakerphone. And he, at that point, also realized, oh, this was all just kind of an innocent sort of little mistake, and hands me the phone and says, I think it's for you. And to this day, I have still never been chewed out like I was on the phone at that point in time. And so they ended up letting us go. We drive back to camp. It was a very quiet van ride back to camp. The kids are exhausted. They're really unhappy. We paddle the next day. It was fine. We kind of rescued things a little bit. And we get back to camp that night and have this long meeting with the camp counselor. And at the end, he pulls us aside and he says, I get what you were doing. I get what you were doing. That was like, you know, you're trying to have fun with them. But that was just about the worst decision you could have made.
So, Keith, I'm curious, were you ever rehired as a camp counselor?
I was.
And did you go back to Canada ever?
I have been back to Canada.
Woo!
I get pulled in every time and have to answer a whole bunch of questions.
Well, if you have more stories, we want to have you back. And also, those people who submitted other stories, we may just hang on to these and contact you to tell your story on another occasion. But also, just please resubmit. And remember, our theme for the next Mudroom is going to be inheritance. So if you have a story, and we would love to hear these people who submitted as well. But let's welcome our next storyteller, Emily Cohen, and who is from Norwich. And welcome, Emily.
Good friend.
And my good friend, yes.
Thank you so much. All right, so everyone can hear me well. That's wonderful. And I see some familiar faces in the audience, for which I'm grateful. So this story begins when I was 22 years old, so also my youth. I was living in the Netherlands at the time, and I met a wonderful young Dutchman named Rob. I was in the Netherlands after having spent a gap year there that turned into ultimately 14 years. That's a story for another time. So Rob and I had only been dating for a few months, and we had quickly discovered that we enjoyed walking. We're both kind of intrinsically shy, so when you walk, you don't have to look each other in the eye, and so we found that easy to just kind of talk and get to know each other. So on sort of this glorious Dutch day, you can kind of imagine a Vermeer painting with big clouds and a landscape, green landscape, and we were actually walking, we saw that we were walking in the dunes by a little town on the coast. And walking, talking, and I looked up in the sky and I saw a glider overhead, kind of gliding peacefully because there's no engine, with its long, thin wings, so it's very characteristic of a glider. And I thought, oh, that's cool. Why did I notice the glider though in the first place? My mother, she I think taught me kind of this fascination with, she had a fascination with small aircraft. And she taught me to kind of look up at the sky and appreciate those things. And where did her fascination start? I think it might have started when she was a civilian airplane spotter in World War II, where she and a friend would be put on some observation post outside their rural town in Pennsylvania, and they would be clutching a stack of index cards that identified German and Japanese planes, and they would be looking in the sky for this enemy aircraft. I think also she spent summers in Connecticut on the coast, and she would spend some exciting hours in a plane with 16-year-old Eddie, who would fly with her in a Cessna over the Long Island Sound, and with a cigarette dangling out of his mouth would say, "Joni, you want to do another loop-de-loop?" which is where you flip over. And my mother used to tell this story with kind of a sparkle in her eye, kind of talking about Eddie and these wonderful summers, and told this story wistfully. And it really is not like my mother to do something reckless like that. I mean, her idea of, an exciting ride at the fair was the teacups. So the fact that she went up in the plane with Eddie was really quite shocking to me. So of course, naturally, I said to Rob, "Wow, there's a glider. That's so cool. I've always wanted to go up in one." And Rob said, "Well, let's go to the airfield and see if they're offering rides." And I thought, oh shit. That was not really what I meant to happen, but what was I expecting? So, he grabbed my hand and we, skipped over there. And so we went there, and yes, they were offering rides. They were cheap, but they were cash only. Oh, that's too bad. We don't have any cash. That's too bad. Another time. He said, "Well, of course, we'll just run to an ATM. Holland's a small country. There's an ATM around everywhere." So we zipped over to the ATM. We got our cash. Went back to the airfield. There were maybe 8 to 10 people there. A glider had just landed. There was someone taking off. And they really only had time for one more flight. So, of course, Rob said, you take it. I'll go next time. And I was like, sure, that sounds great. And gave them money, and I met my pilot, who was roughly 80 years old. And he kind of explained that we would be winched into the air. So we'd be attached to this rope and launched into the air, kind of like a kite. And then we would be up there on our flight for a little while. So he was explaining that, and so I got in, and the cockpit kind of closed, and I noticed my dress got caught in the cockpit door, so they had to open the door again, and I thought, oh, I could escape. I actually could escape now. It wouldn't be too awkward. I would say I felt sick, and I was really afraid of heights. But instead, they pulled my dress, or I pulled my dress in, and they closed the cockpit door, and off we went. So the winch, the way that works is you just get launched into the air at a 40-degree angle pretty much. And it's faster and steeper than in a commercial airliner. And I don't know about you, but when I take off in a commercial airliner, I hold on to the person next to me if I know them well. And if there's no one next to me, I hold on to the chair. So I thought, and this is it, we're going to space. That's how it felt. But at a given point, we were released, and this very gentle, almost like this thump kind of occurred, like we just kind of landed up and we're floating. We were free. The winch had let us go. And so we floated up on the thermals, because that's how the glider stays afloat. And the pilot, I was looking mostly at the pilot, thinking, so he had his knobby arthritic hands on the yoke, and he was kind of explaining everything to me and looking out, telling me what we were seeing, and I really didn't hear a word he said. I kind of saw where we were. I was pretty much holding my breath the entire time. And so then, it was over. We'd been up there for only really about 10 minutes. And so it was time for landing. And landing a glider is pretty tricky because they have these long, thin wings I mentioned before, and it really takes some skill to land them properly and not break them. But he did beautifully, right? He had done it a million times. So we landed. It was fine. And I got out of the plane, and Rob was beaming, and he was so happy to see me, grabbed my hand, went back to the car. And he said, "I'm really glad you made it safely. I was really afraid the pilot would have a heart attack, and then you would have to take over the controls. And you don't really seem like the type to know how to do that. So I'm grateful that you're back." And so that was my first and last flight in a glider. Rob and I did participate in some other what I would consider reckless sports after that. So wall climbing. Canyoning, and then we went to Patagonia, where we had to navigate these really high and rickety suspension bridges, and really that was it for me. The bridges, I was just done. My courage just dissipated. The real me emerged. I was like, "Rob, take it or leave it. I am scared of everything, actually. Mice, snakes, heights." We still got married, and we're still married, and Rob does his reckless sports with his friends. So.
Thank you so much, Emily. And I also remember Rob being here a few years ago, telling a story about asking for your hand in marriage, which is another story I remember really well and liked very much. Let's welcome our next storyteller, Jess Marbacher, another local from the Upper Valley, and Jess is also, beside working in mental health, she also is a playwright, right? Is that correct? And a repeat storyteller with many wonderful stories that she told here. Thank you. Thank you.
So when I was about 19 or 20, I fancied myself a bit of a badass. Not too much of a badass, because I desperately didn't want to get in trouble, ever. So I was the kind of badass who would research laws around the rules I was going to break beforehand. And the kind of badass who printed up on her own computer a certificate that said I was, in fact, a certified badass. But I wasn't that much of a badass. So after I had gone away to my first year of college, a year that was completely devoid of sex, drugs, or rock and roll, I came home and I was looking to get into a little bit of light mischief with my friends from home. And as it turned out, my friend B had the perfect idea for her and our other friend Carlina and I to go do. And it involved a defunct military fort. And where I grew up on the seacoast, there are actually a bunch of these defunct military forts. They were built in World War I and World War II. They never really needed to be used and then were just abandoned. And so when I was a child, my family would go visit these forts because you could walk around. Some of them are in state parks and you just tour around. And the fort that my friend B had planned for us to go to, I had a really distinct memory of from when I was a kid. I had gone with my friend Calvin and his parents and a couple other friends to walk around. And in one of the rooms in this bunker, someone had written on the floor in what looked like blood, "Virgin blood tastes better." So that was the memory I had in mind when B mentioned this fort, and I was like, well, this will be perfect, because I know teenagers have done mischief there before. Now, our mischief was very much less vampiric and less vandalism-y. All we wanted to do was at the bottom of the stairs they had that led to the upper stories of the fort, they had the little bar across because they didn't want you to go up there. But we wanted to go up there. And B had the intel that it was actually, it was pretty easy to go on this roof because she had previously gone up there to make out with some guy. So she had scoped it all out for us. So B, Carlina, and I all hopped in my purple minivan, which, as you'll all know, is the vehicle of choice for the Rebel set. And we carpooled on over. And it was surprisingly easy. You know, we did what we planned. We just hopped over the little bar, went up on the roof, and sat up on the roof chatting. And occasionally we had to lower our voices a little bit because we could hear other people who were just walking around the part of the fort you're supposed to be in. But after a while, the novelty kind of wore off, and we were like, well, we're just on this roof. What fun is that? So we decided we would go to the beach, because badasses also like the beach. And as it turned out, my favorite beach was quite close. My favorite beach growing up was always Newcastle Common, for 3 reasons. It's pretty small, so it was never super busy. It had an awesome playground, which I was still interested in at 19. And there are crabapple trees, so you can throw crabapples if you're friends, if that's something you're interested in, which I also was at 19. But the problem with Newcastle Common is that it's also part of a state park, so you have to pay to get in. And I was a college student working 2 jobs that summer, one of which was an unpaid internship, the other paid $8 an hour. So I didn't really want to pay. So our plan was we would drive to the library that's next to the entrance. We would scamper over, see if anyone was in the booth to pay, because it was still early in the season. And if not, we would go to that beach. So we did that. We got to the parking lot. Carlina B and I all hopped out of the car, ran over. There was no one in the booth, so we ran back to my car to drive over. And as we're getting back in the car and I close my door, I hear screaming from behind me. Carlina is saying, "Oh my God, Jess, open the door, oh my God." And I panic, but I do open the door, and it turns out I had accidentally shut Carlina's fingers in the door of my minivan. And they do not look good. They are purpling a shade to rival the color of my van. But I was like, I'm prepared for this. I was a lifeguard for 2 summers. I have a great first aid kit in the back of the car. We can deal with this. So B and I take Carlina to the back of the van, and she's reassuring us. She's like, "I'm fine, guys, I'm fine. You know, it just really hurt. It still hurts, but I'm fine." And as I crack open the ice pack and I get it on her hand, she stops telling us she's fine. And she starts saying that she's actually feeling quite dizzy. And I was like, well, that's okay. Just sit down on the bumper, put your head down between your knees. This is fine. So she starts to sit down, and she goes past the bumper, and she sits all the way down on the ground. And then she passes out. And her eyes roll back in her head, and she starts having a seizure. And B and I start panicking. And we say, what do we do? Should we call 911? Because I was like, well, this is an emergency, but is it an emergency enough? And as B and I are having this panicked discussion, we see a group of cyclists coming down the driveway from the beach, and they're going to cross right through the parking lot of the library. So I have B stabilizing Carlina's head, and I run over to these bicyclists and I say, help us. I shut my friend's fingers in the car door, and now she's passed out. And they say, well, have you called 911? And I said, no, but of course we should call 911. Carlina's on the ground, of course we should. So I start dialing for 911, and as I do, Carlina wakes up and vomits across the pavement. Now the cyclist who's at the head of the line says, that's probably a good sign, girls, and then they bike off. And to scream at him, "No, don't go. Does it look like we have any part of this under control? We didn't even call 911 until you told us to." But by that point, I mean, I can't blame him, because if two hysterical girls approached me in a parking lot while their friend was vomiting, I might not want to hang out with them either. So but I've dialed 911 and I've connected to the operator, and I tell them where they are and they're sending someone. And the first to arrive is the fire department. So they immediately hop out and they go over and they're tending to Carlina. And Carlina is waking up more now, and she's given her phone to B. And B is on the phone with Carlina's mom, and one of the other firefighters is talking to me, asking me some other questions. And I'm doing okay, and I'm answering him, and I start to calm down. And as I start to calm down, I also start to feel a little dizzy. And this shouldn't be a huge surprise to me, because I was always that kid in health class who had to be led out of the room lest I pass out. We watched a heart attack video in 8th grade and I was wheeled to the nurse's office. Same thing when we watched a bulimia video in 10th grade. They didn't even bother having me watch the video about heroin because they knew what was coming. Now, without knowing any of this, the firefighter who I'm talking to can see that I'm not doing so well anymore. And he asks me what's going on, and I say, "It's all right, I'm just a little squeamish." So he has me hop in the back of my own minivan and lie down on the seat and put my legs up over the back seat and out the trunk. And that's where I am when the ambulance arrives. Now, the paramedics from the ambulance, they see Carlina and they immediately go right over to her. And then at one point, one of them looks up, because I can hear them say, "What's this, a casualty of war?" So I call from the back seat, "No, I'm just a little squeamish." But it's fine. I can hear Carlina recovering. I can hear the paramedics talking to her and say, you just had a big rush of adrenaline for the pain. That's why you passed out. Carlina is doing better. I can feel myself starting to do better. But it's as I'm lying there in the back of my own van with the legs sticking out the trunk that I realize I'm maybe not cut out to be a badass.
Jess, I think you're a badass storyteller. Now, our final storyteller for tonight is Kevin Gallagher. I haven't seen you yet, Kevin. Are you here? Yay! Kevin is coming to us all the way from Burlington, Vermont. And he's told stories many times here. He's, I would say, practically a professional storyteller. Yeah, he even has his own storytelling nonprofit in Burlington, Tell It Forward. Though in his daytime, he's more of a listener as a therapist. Please welcome Kevin. Woo!
For the last, probably over 25 years now, there's this marvelous event in mid-February around Valentine's Day in Burlington called Winter is a Drag Ball. And it brings out all the gays and lesbians who want to be outrageous for an evening. Some straight people too, because they sort of enjoy pretending to be gay and lesbian. It's a thing now. It used to not be a thing, but now straight people want to be gay, or at least seem it. And it's a magical evening. You know, there's music and makeup and costumes and mayhem. Packs a really big crowd. So I've been a frequent person going, but I do not like drag. And I'm sure for most of you straight people here, you assume that most gay men actually live for the times to wear a dress and heels and a wig. But no, like some of us will never do that, ever. Costumes just make me very uncomfortable, to the point that for Halloween growing up, I was the same thing every year because I didn't like getting dressed up. I I was sort of a person without a home who rode the trains from town to town. I think the term back then was hobo, but I'm sure that's not PC anymore. So I was just a town to town on the train kind of person, and was so happy when I got to high school and didn't have to trick or treat anymore. Or I could have quit earlier, I suppose, if I had tried. But this Winter is a Drag Ball is really like a fantastic event. And for those of you who have an interest in sort of history of drag, because really it's quite sophisticated and intricate and complex. There's a great documentary called Paris is Burning, if you got a little time on your hands. But this one particular year, we all gathered at a friend's, those who dress up and those who don't, and the ones who don't are in charge of dressing the ones that do. So it's hair and makeup and ironing their costumes and helping them with girdles and all that kind of stuff. So it's also a drinking time too, you know. So 1 or 2 martinis, maybe 3, you know, occur that afternoon, and they all start, Kevin, you really should go and drag this year. And I said, no, I really shouldn't. I don't like drag. I don't even like a costume. Which made me sort of think like, why did I not mind wearing a costume being an altar boy? But I thought maybe that's because that's a uniform, not really a costume. So I said, I really don't want to. And they said, no, we will come up with the outfit. You don't have to do anything. We will dress you. We'll make sure you look fabulous. And just try it once. So the martinis won. You know, so for the next 2 hours, I was transformed into the naughty night nurse. I had a very tight nurse's uniform on, inappropriately short for a real nurse. With a very tight corset underneath, and then 2 big sets of knee socks, you know, tucked down in front to complete the bosom. Huge blonde wig, eyelashes, blue eyeshadow, because that's probably what nurses wear, naughty night nurses wear. 2 pairs of white stockings, because I was not going to shave my legs. So 1 pair for hair, the other pair for white. And then size 12 white stiletto heels. And I do have to say, I look pretty good. I have really good legs in heels and stockings. Yeah, really good. But it wasn't really helping my nervousness. But when I looked at myself and I thought, well, no one's going to recognize you, Kevin. Just go, relax, you know, we're having fun, just like go and have a good time. So we get there, and it really is really fantastic. It is like going to a ball. You walk in, and the place is transformed, and the wild colors and costumes and design, like, my God, the creativity is just unbelievable. And so I thought, well, no one's going to know anybody here. Look at all of us. We'll be fine. So out on the dance floor I go. I'm shaking my booty. And 3 or 4 songs later, I kind of walk off the dance floor, and this guy comes up to me, and he goes, Kevin, is that you? And I turn around, and I'm like, hi, Dave. Dave's a client of mine. Yeah. Hi, you know, hi, Dave. How are you? And he goes, wow, you look amazing. I'm like, yeah, okay, thank you. It's like really weird, but okay. And he said, can you stay right here while I go get my wife? And I'm like, sure. So he gets the wife, and she's like, I was hoping I'd meet you someday. I said, I was hoping I'd wear pants when I met you, but you know, we don't always get what we want. And she said, well, you're very beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, thank you. It's not like what you tell your husband's therapist. You're so beautiful. So I kind of got over that, had another drink, went back on the dance floor. About midway through the evening, music stops. This guy gets up to the mic, and he said, we're going to announce the finalists for the drag queen. And I thought, oh, I wonder who's going to be in the finals, because there were so many amazing drag people there. And so they're going through the names, and then they get to number 8, and they're like, the blonde nurse. And there's a big spotlight on me, and I'm like, I'm saying to my friends, I'm not going up there. I'm not going up there. And, you know, and everyone's clapping, and I'm like, no. So I go over to one of the organizers, and I said, I didn't sign up to be in it. Like, I'm just here as a regular nurse. I'm not I'm not a performer. I'm not anything. And he says, honey, get your ass up there on the stage. So I go up on the stage. By this time, any of the intoxicating effects of alcohol had disappeared. I am pitting out my nurse's uniform. I'm thinking, oh my God, this is like really awful. I'm shaking. I find out there's like, you know, you have to have the question, and then you have to have the talent portion. And I'm like, you know, my brain is just like this, you know, but still looking good. Still looking good. So the question I handled fine. You know, it was a much better question than, you know, during your first year as Miss America, what would you like to accomplish? You know, world peace. You know, that one was always popular, if you remember. So I did the question fine, but the talent, I thought, I don't have any talent. And for some reason, I was so nervous, I was thinking I needed to have nurse talent. And so that made it even harder for me to come up with something. Like, I'm like give vaccines? Like what's a nurse do for talent? So I recited the Hippocratic Oath in my best Marilyn Monroe soft voice. So not surprising I wasn't in the top 3 or the top 2 or the top 1 because actually other people really did have talent. So I did not get any further than just being the 8th person on the stage. So I couldn't wait to get off the stage. I said hello to all my friends. They were like, oh, you did great. You look so good up there. And I got to go home. I just have to go home. So I go outside, and there's a guy sort of kind of using the wall as a hanger to hold him up. Very cute guy, ripped with leather pants and a black fishnet shirt and a dog collar with a leash. So I sort of went and I said, and I didn't have a coat, he didn't have a coat, because you can't put a coat over an outfit. And I said, in February in Vermont, and stiletto heels in February in Vermont. And so I said, are you waiting for a cab? And he said, yes. I said, okay. So the cab comes, I start to get in the cab. He's still there, I get his leash. And I bring him, and put him in the car. We drop him off at his house. And then I go to my house. Feels so good to get those heels off and to get the corset off. And I'm crawling into bed and I'm thinking sort of like, oh, you know, they say, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. And I sort of thought, it takes more than the village people to get a gay man to try drag for the first time. But it ended up not being my first time. I mean, my last time. And so I don't have a picture from that night. But that following Christmas, I had the same wig, because you end up with a lot of clothes when you start doing drag. If you're unaware, I'm the gorgeous one in the middle. Yeah. Thank you.
How can you not like dressing up? I'd like to go. When is that ball?
Usually around Valentine's.
Send me the information. And, well, thank you all for being here. And especially thanks to all the storytellers. Let's give them another round of applause. And again, just as a reminder, if you want to practice storytelling without having to be in front of a big audience, come and join our community storytelling at a jam, and the building is called Marketplace in White River Junction, a week from today, 6 o'clock, and we'll just have a story circle. Thank you. Oh, and if you know anyone who wants to take a writing course, pass on the information about the one I'm offering. And see you in March for the next Mudroom. March, the theme is gonna be inheritance, so start thinking about stories you can share. See you then. Thank you.